really excited today to have you meet a person who's become a good friend of mine. I first met her many years ago when she started teaching at the school that I taught at. She's in a seventh and eighth grade middle school social studies teacher. Sarah is just, I've watched her from her first year of teaching to now. She has grown so much as a teacher. She's been a tennis coach, she's a college athlete, and she's phenomenal making connections and staying connected to the kids that she's worked with. One of the things that I get to follow, because we follow each other on social media, I've gotten to see how she stays connected to the students out there and the other kids that went to school when they're into their 20s and that she's worked with over the last 17, 18 years in just Richfield. She's been 23 years in the profession. So I hope you can pick up some great tips from Sarah today. She's a wonderful lady, an awesome teacher, and I know that she's beloved by her students and the parents that work with her. So enjoy the show today, and we'll see you down the road. Hi, and welcome to this edition of Coach Etch Tips and Team Up with Coach E. I'm here with a good friend of mine, colleague of mine. We met many years ago, and full disclosure here, Sarah, she was my daughter's sixth grade teacher, and it was her, I think, was that your first year teaching?
My first year teaching.
First year teaching, and I've watched her grow over the years and watched her develop relationships with so many kids. It's kind of neat to see how she has dealt with kids in our building and helped them go along, and then to see how she follows them and stays connected through social media and different things throughout in the comments. And I think that means a lot to kids. I know what kids think of her. I've heard them talk about it. So why don't you, Sarah, take a minute here, talk kind of what brought you here to education and kind of what made you passionate about it, made you kind of make that be the purpose in your life from a professional standpoint.
Sure. I first got interested in teaching. Probably my mom noticed that I had the skills back in preschool. I was very nurturing as a little one. And so I would go around and try to read stories to people in the preschool room or try to get them to play. Some might find that bossy. I found it as a leadership quality. And so growing up in a family of teachers, I was surrounded by the classroom. I would go in, and my mom was a para. So she worked typically one-on-one with students in the mainstream classroom that had special needs. And so I would go in and help her and her cooperating teacher. We would decorate the classroom. I would put up bulletin boards. My aunt was an ESL teacher, and I would love to correct papers for her and put the stickers on. And I thought grading was so amazing, and I wish I could find that passion for grading once again. And then my dad he started out as a Phi Ed teacher and then became an administrator for Schaumburg, Illinois, which is the second largest school district in Illinois. Mm-hmm. And so he, as an administrator, had a different perspective on the education world. So I was exposed to more of the organizational pieces behind the scenes. He did early childhood special ed, and he was involved with the Special Olympics. And so we went out in high school, we volunteered, we were involved with that. We worked with the students. Both of my parents helped me get one of my first jobs working at a special ed school for early childhood as an aide. And I just fell in love with teaching. I loved being able to see the growth. I think that instant gratification that we sometimes need and search for in our online life, that can be fulfilling, but seeing it over long term is what really fills my bucket. I love seeing where they start and how they grow and then where they end. And as you know, in education, that can be a year-long process.
Yeah, it definitely can be. Was there, I mean, you talked about your mother and father exposing you as a student. Was there like one of those special teachers that you just really kind of hit you at some point in your life and just really kind of made you believe in yourself a little bit more or help guide you somewhere that you still kind of look back and reflect and maybe you even still stay in touch with today? I don't know. Is there somebody like that that was in your life?
Well, my eighth grade math teacher was probably one of the people that influenced me, Mr. Kruger. And I was in remedial math in eighth grade, and I really struggled with it. But he had a way of teaching in small groups and in large groups, and he really understood the flipped classroom before it was a thing. And for me, he was able to get me through that process in eighth grade so that I could actually take math with my peers in high school, which is when you're switching schools and you're young, that's like a huge deal. Once I got into high school, my algebra teacher was also my tennis coach, Mr. Galhar. He was super influential, more on the court than in the classroom. But he kind of taught me that attitude is everything. And he drilled that both in the classroom and on the courts. And it's just something that I've kind of carried with me, that whatever attitude you take into something is what you're going to get out of it and what you're going to get back from the people that you're teaching and or in front of. So, and Mr. Phillips, he was amazing. He was my high school world history teacher, and he got me interested in this topic of social studies, which is what I teach. And I remember that he gave those old Scantron tests for you to fill in the bubbles. And the final, I got one wrong out of 100. But the problem is, I don't know what question it was.
Yeah.
So I ran into him actually a few years ago, and I told him that, and he was just embarrassed that that was the way he taught back then. But that was like his first year of teaching. So, but he got me really interested in the content piece.
Yeah, well, I think you played a role in that with my daughter. Some she had you that first year, and then she had Andy Euler the next 2 years in looping, and just two outstanding social studies teachers. And she's pursued that path of working for government and loves history and all facets. I mean, she's like a walking Wikipedia or something when it comes
Oh,
to that stuff,
that
not
is so
America, but the
awesome.
world. But now that brought you to teaching, and I know you've been in it maybe 18 years now, 17 years,
23.
23. Okay.
Yeah.
This year's probably like a year you've never experienced the last 10 or 11 months. And just if we'll get a little more into the normal world, which hopefully we're all back in next fall of creating relationships. So what are some things in COVID that you've had to learn, monitor, and adjust? I know literally within a week or two, boom, it got dumped on you and everything you did had to kind of change. And probably that you can get it, there's all the technical stuff, but just trying to stay connected to kids. And I know how important that was to you personally and how
Mhm.
much the kids like that when you were in person in the classroom. What are some things you've done to try and work through that challenge to connect with them still?
I think my colleagues have been really helpful with that. We're really cognizant that our student population thrives on relationships with their teachers. And so working together with some of my colleagues, just creating some online community builders, looking at what can we do to make it as fun and as interactive as we possibly can. The other thing is just trying to still be me. So a lot of times, and I've gotten better, I think I'm looser in front of the camera now, but I start off the hour with like a dance party and I am just dancing and they all have their cameras off, but I don't care. I leave it all out there on the dance floor. And, it just, I think helps them to feel comfortable. Like, oh, if she can act that ridiculous, it doesn't matter if I give a wrong answer or something. So I think having that and a couple of kids start out like as a DJ, so getting them involved in picking the music, making them feel like they have a buy-in still in the classroom. Like, what are our norms? Having them create those, and just trying to find something about each of them that I can connect with. Because what I'm looking at is just a little dot, and that little dot has a little picture of their icon or something that's important to them. And so being able to take notice of that and use that as a starting off point or a discussion piece to get to know them has been really helpful as well.
Yeah.
I'm lucky with my eighth graders. A lot of them I had last year. So that was a way easier start than my seventh graders who I've never had before.
Oh, okay. So you used to do both seventh and eighth grade?
I do. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
One of the things you just kind of touched on your dancing and being you. And I think sometimes as teachers to create those relationships, we have to be a bit vulnerable and let the students get to know us. Because if we want to get to know them, get to know us. And so what are some things you kind of do? I mean, how vulnerable are you? How open are you about who you are in your life so the student knows about you're just not this Miss Holm that when school's over goes and lives under a rock and then comes back to school the next day.
Right, right. One of the things that I found very helpful, especially during virtual learning, is Twitter. And there is a fantastic teacher out there, Esther Park, and she has created many different interactive ways to involve students. Like one of them being a virtual locker. So the students had to go out and create a virtual locker, putting in items, decorating their locker, what are things that are important to them. And I, of course, did one for myself. And so this allows the students to get a glimpse of who I am and what I like and what my interests are. Um, so just kind of like favorite TV shows and just, non-academic things. I think once we get to know someone and we get to have that relationship,
Yeah.
they'll do anything for you. And so I think in order to get to the content, getting to that relationship piece is huge. And part of that is opening up and being vulnerable and making sure that, I am going to make mistakes. My subject is very subjective. So there really are no right or wrong answers when you're talking about different perspectives in history. So for me also to take that pressure off and say, I don't have all the answers. Let's look it up, or
Yeah.
let's have a discussion on that, or, oh, tell me more. I think it leaves it open for them to make sure that they have their voice heard in the classroom as well.
Yeah, that's a good thing, because a common thread is that people that I've talked to is students feeling like their voice is heard. And that's kind of developing trust and connecting once they feel like you're hearing them, that's an important thing. And what I've kind of seen over the years, sometimes the teachers that struggle with relationships are so busy trying to tell them what to do and how to do it, that they don't really hear their voices and say, okay, I hear you. What do you think about doing this together? And I
Right.
think that's one thing that's probably made you a successful teacher. And one of the things I regret as a teacher, that I couldn't have gotten to spend more time in other colleagues' classrooms watching them teach, because we're all unique and different. We have to be our personality. And that's what the kids can connect with. And what maybe works for me didn't necessarily work for you, but bits and pieces could be. And what worked for you might help me too. And I did a lot of team teaching in my subject area, which was cool. And I got to work with some great teachers, working with people like Pat and Mark and Tom Chrisway back at the high school people. And I learned a lot from people coming through. And I thought that was always important to me, because that's really, when it came to relationships, I had to go to coaching clinics. I had to go listen to speakers. I had to read books, listen to tapes and stuff. What are some things you did? I know that first day when you walk back into a classroom and all of a sudden, here's your 25 to 35 kids in class and you're going, oh my gosh. And as you went through the years, maybe some things you learned you could have done different, or what did you use for resources if you didn't have them?
Yeah, back in the day when you could buy books like in an actual bookstore, like the teacher store, I would go and like find these academic books that would make the content come alive. I was always looking for ways to make it interactive, make it tangible, make it like creative. And that allows students to have some of that expression or that voice and that creativity piece. I really enjoy going in there that first day and telling them why my class is important. And this is something that I've learned from Dr. Hines, our current principal, is that just like adults, students need to know why. Why are they there? And once they understand the why and the relevance, they build that trust, they build that relationship. Now they're ready to build the skills. And I think coming in that first day and giving them that why and showing them through pop culture how history repeats itself really relates to the kids. And then they start getting curious about what they're going to learn. And then you've got that buy-in.
Yeah, and I think you're lucky. You're in a subject area where lots of times you can find some sort of bind that will be intriguing, especially to a 7th or 8th grade student, where some other subjects
Yeah.
can be a little more challenging to get that buy-in
Sure.
at the time and to make it fun. But when
Yeah.
you start to build community or culture in your classroom, is there anything in particular you do to help the kids? You talked about things doing with you and them connecting, but to make the rest of them connect and feel comfortable and feel safe and being able to be open, because you talk about having to have discussions that sometimes might be kind of challenging, because like you said, it is a
Sure.
matter of opinion or a point of view. It's not a factual straight answer. What are some things you do in a social studies classroom setting to deal with that and help that kind of feel, hey, this is like home, I feel safe here?
Right. That is always hard, and it always depends on the makeup of the class. And so you can have some classes that are very verbal and you can have some classes that are really text-based.
Yeah.
So it's just getting a reading of your student makeup in that class, and that changes even throughout the year. So a couple things that I do is I preface any discussion that we're going to have. So I'll say, today we're going to be talking about some really sensitive topics. We're not going to have all the answers. We are going to have different opinions, and it's okay to disagree, but you disagree with the topic, not the person. And so we work on giving them little sentence stems, like, I agree with this point of view, but I disagree with this part. And so that way it gives affirmation that the other student has been heard, but then it also opens it up for self-expression as well.
Uh-huh.
So I think giving them some of those sentence stems, making that displayed and having that pre-conversation that it's going to be a tough topic. I tell them that we have tough topics when we talk about race and equity in our classrooms and in our staff development, and how it can be a very sensitive subject because everyone has some feeling around it, and those feelings are big feelings. And so kind of using the accept non-closure, just kind of be present, come from your own place, don't speak for others. And so kind of using those in our discussions and setting that forth, it can allow for a conversation to grow. And if I find that that conversation isn't growing, then giving them a chance to write, or maybe that's just not what that class wants to dive into. Maybe they're more interested in something else. So always being respectful of that and moving forward when they're ready to.
Yeah, that's cool. I can see, because every class can be different because you bring different personalities together, and it's like just kind of I many years ago, kind of monitor and adjust and be flexible and be open. It's not that rigid. I think that's absolutely awesome. Now, when you set that class up, and we've been talking about relationships, but are there some things just from a structural standpoint you do that you kind of at the beginning of the year, throughout the year, said these are kind of non-negotiables, boys and girls, that this is kind of something, this is where I'm going to draw the line. I'll let you have a voice, I want you to do all these different things, but here's where you've got to know that this is a no-no, and here there's consequences, and here's the structure of the classroom. Is there some things you do? Do you make it involved? Do you keep it pretty simple, or how do you do that?
I just kind of keep it simple. Like, usually where I see them going over the line is in their sense of humor. I think with middle school students, they're really learning how far to push their humor. And I see that with my own kids too.
Yeah.
And so just kind of having, what, you're getting close to a line and you're getting close to crossing it. So why don't we just stop there? And if you think you have something funny to say, just jot it down and I'll check. And if it's good, I'll let you say it. But if not, you cross the line. And I think it's just having them know that I don't really see students crossing the line in terms of our discussions, but it's more in terms of like the before class when they're joking around, or when they're just testing the limits of their humor.
Yeah.
So I keep it pretty simple and pretty relaxed. I don't think I really do anything specific in terms of, you know, I don't think calling them out. I think that's part of the relationship building, is that one-on-one as well. Middle school kids are so sensitive where they are because they're changing and growing every day. They're learning new skills. And I heard a speaker at the U of M one time say that their brains are learning things just as fast as a toddler. But we think that they know more because they're older and they can handle it, but really they can't. And so I think a lot of repetition, I think a lot of one-on-one conversations, because then it keeps it private, and also you can have that respect conversation. If you do that out loud in front of the whole class, it can be very demoralizing to that student.
Yeah. Now, kind of, you talk a lot in the classroom, and I know you connect with kids in other ways. I know you've been involved in coaching and stuff like that. What are some things that you maybe do to try and connect with the student outside the classroom, in the world outside of that social studies class, that 50 minutes they spend with you, and get to know the whole person, not just the student in that classroom?
A lot of that is trying to find out what they're interested in and what they're involved in. And a lot of times they'll invite me to their games or to their theater. And while that does take a big investment and time out of your own personal schedule as a teacher, it's super important to the kid. And they don't care if you're there the whole time. They're just glad you showed up. And so it's just making sure maybe you set aside one night a week where you just go to those events and you stay late and you just make that investment in the kids, because in the long run, it's really worth it when you turn around and you come back to that relationship piece. A little bit of giving up yourself goes a long way with them.
Yeah, I think that's a big deal, and it's challenging too when you have to balance your own life around all of that. Now, and let's kind of move into your own life. I think teachers, we talked about how stressful COVID's been, how people have had the word for the year. My wife and I kid about it. Oh, it's a basketball term for me in coaching, but it's called pivot now. Probably was one for you in tennis too. But you got to pivot, and emotionally, mentally, physically. What are some of the things that, as we move into that, one of the first things that kind of come into all that is that as a teacher, you're in there, but you always have to be dealing with outside sources. And I think one of the things that becomes most challenging for teachers is for a number of different reasons, but is dealing with the people you work for and maybe some you work with. But you've had different administrators. I've been through a lot of it with you. The new observation system that many states in the country have now. I've talked to multiple teachers from other countries that Danielson's a big part of their evaluation system, and it doesn't always work out the way you want it to go. I've talked to the administrators that used to be a colleague but all of a sudden are administrator, and now they have to do the evaluation and stuff, and the balancing act of all that. How have you, from that aspect of just being evaluated, and I know you have peer evaluations, but administrative ones, how have you balanced dealing with all that? Because that's the hard part for teaching. It's always hard to have somebody come in and critique us.
Right, right. And I think for me, it's the amount of paperwork that's involved in the observation or evaluation process. I think as I've gotten older, I don't need to necessarily write out a full lesson plan like I used to. And so when you get out of that practice and you get into the evaluation system, and now you're forced to look at every single thing that you do in a lesson under a microscope, what I have found is there are so many things that I leave out that I do naturally that I never even thought of that administrators and evaluators are looking for. Whether it's like using nonverbals to direct the students, or whether it's just movement around the classroom. We tend to call these envoy strategies is the new term for that. And so I think that part of it that comes naturally is really hard to be, oh, I didn't realize that that's what you were looking for kind of thing. It is, whenever an evaluator comes into my classroom, I pretend that they're part of the class. And so I think it was last year I had Ryan Finke in who is my assistant principal, to observe one of my lessons, and I made him part of the lesson. And he got in there and he got involved, and it was fantastic and it was great. And it helped me to relax too.
Yeah.
And it helped the kids to kind of relax, because whenever they see an administrator, they kind of tense up a little bit. And I wanted him to see how we really were, because they were just an amazing group of kiddos. Right now, my peer evaluator is a good friend of mine. And so for that, it has a different feel. It's more of a, hey, I have this new strategy and I trust you. Can you tell me if this is working or not? And it's been a really great way, especially in COVID times, to try out some new tech stuff and get honest feedback, and also have that relationship with the person who's giving me the honest feedback, because I really respect her as a teacher as well.
Now then, that's important to hear, and openness to learning and working with people. That's been a common thread I've heard of people handling those things, because it's not always easy. The other thing that's kind of outside the classroom I found over the years, and probably a little more so when you're coaching, but in the classroom, is dealing with the parent guardian communication. Is there, how you've balanced that? I mean, I know it's always easy to send a communication to a parent and say, hey, your son or daughter isn't getting their work done, they're not doing this, they misbehave this way. Are there things you do to try and create those relationships, to connect with them a little bit more and get a positive out there, or just in dealing with parents? Because you've probably dealt with them in both ways, athletics and in the classroom.
Yeah, it's both in athletics and the classroom. It's just making sure that they have a place where they can be heard too, because they're there for their kid. They're there, that's their child. And if you are a parent, you know that feeling. You have a very protective feeling over your child, and you want what's best for them. And I think if you look at it from that perspective, it can help that relationship between the teacher or the coach and the parent. I do positive calls, or right now, because of COVID, we are given Google Voice through our district. I send texts to parents, and I try to send as many positives as I can, because when I look at everything that's going on, the amount of students I have that are doing amazing things are such a large number compared to those not doing their work. And so at the beginning, I was throwing all my energy into, they're not turning this in, they're not doing this. They're not, I'm like, but what are they doing? And that's when I ended up sending that text or that call or email to that parent and to say, hey, I want to know your kid's showing up every day. And I'm really excited that he's there and he's in the classroom and he's part of the discussion. Now we need to kick it up a notch and have him complete, one out of the 3 assignments. So it's building on those positives. And I think that also helped me to fill myself up too, because I was very hard on myself. I'm like, what am I doing? Why is this not happening? And then it really forced me to look at the good and then share that with the parents. And the reception I had from the parents was amazing. And now if something happens where I'm like, oh, this isn't good, they need to get on board here, I've got that relationship.
Well, that's great, because one thing I learned early on here coming to Richfield 30 years ago and being the head basketball coach and expectations, this is before I had children, is that parents really like to hear a compliment on their child. And I've had parents, so they just go, really, are you kidding me? Are you sure that's my son? That's my daughter, at times, but it's, and then sometimes just letting people know, letting the parents know, also, you have a bigger belief in the student than they do in themselves at times, but also in their parents do. I know I saw one thing today on Facebook, somebody, I think we know, I can't remember who shared it, but it talked about, every time the parent is criticizing their child, they're not helping them get better. They're just making them feel worse about themselves. And that balance of giving positivity. I know as a teacher, I did that for a lot of years, especially with some of my more challenging students, is shoot an email, a message, or a phone call and give the parent, when they had one good day out of 10,
Yeah.
positive good day. And then I lived here in the community last 35 years. So a lot of those people, I had to walk into the grocery store, or into the restaurant, or into the church and sit with them on Sunday morning after their son or daughter just got cut from the team, or they didn't pass my class. So that found positives are really a great thing to have.
Yeah.
And now I think the last thing that really gets the hardest on the teachers from a mindfulness part is balancing work and home. And in this technology world, COVID always is a different thing, but turn that computer off at the end of the day, how late you grade, when do you go back on at night? Then I know you've got children in and out of sports and different things in your family life. How have you dealt with that? Because in today's world, especially as your children get older, it becomes harder and harder.
Yeah, it for sure does. It's definitely a team effort here at the Holm household, because my husband is a huge supporter and he knows how passionate I am about teaching, but he also knows that I need to take care of myself and I also need to be present to enjoy the moments. And so he has, during COVID, I have taken over our basement because it's a place where I can physically turn the computer off and go up the stairs into a completely different environment. If I'm doing grading, he will shut me down after dinner. He's like, I will make dinner. And he does. He cooks all the time. He's like, you grade, get that done. But then after dinner, you're part of the family and we're done grading. I always make sure that, especially right now, that I have one day on the weekend where I don't open the computer. I don't look at my work email. I don't look at my calendar. So usually that day is Saturday. So tomorrow I will not do anything school related. Now, does that mean on Sunday I might have to work a little bit extra? Maybe, but at least I had my one day of rest, which I think is so important to do. It's also the day that my kids have the most sports. So I'm also present for them and I'm not, distracted by what's going on with my students or getting grades done. And it does take a super long time to get that balance. And I think it's just being very disciplined and then having people around you that will give you those reminders. Nope, you need to shut that computer down. I think that's helpful. On my phone, I have to dig into my apps to get to my work email. So it's actually work to get to work email on my phone. And I did that on purpose because then it gives me time to be like, wait a minute, do I really need to be checking my email? It's 8 p.m. So I think trying to do a little bit of that, having people around you that will remind you of that, and then just exercising is so great. Because I know you listen to podcasts a lot. You can get ideas while you work out. You can escape while you work out. And it does give you that breather and that fresh air for yourself to kind of rejuvenate, especially when you're in front of a screen all day.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that so much because I've not through the battle much anymore, being retired, but going through that, it was a challenge. I tell you what, raising the kids, wife and I going different spots, different sports, and then also balancing the coaching with it. But what I usually like to kind of wrap up with, Sarah, and you talked a little bit earlier about the word why. And I think sometimes when teachers have those rough days, they just got to kind of look into it. And I know sometimes people find out that this really isn't their passion. This really isn't where they need to believe, and they'd go to a different career. But I know that there's times in my career I had to look back to why I'm doing this and really dig deep as my passion and purpose. And sometimes I don't know who's watching this. It could be a young teacher just wondering, am I doing the right thing? I'm just trying to learn a little bit more. It could be a seasoned vet watching it, just trying to pick up another tip, and their why is pretty ingrained. But anything to say a little bit about your why, and for a teacher about, I mean, you've been around long enough, 23 years to see the rewards that come back, the kids that you grew, and you like, yeah, we talk about my daughter and where she's gone in her life when you first met her in sixth grade. And I know you've had many other kids. We've had kids in Richfield go on to Stanford, MIT, other places, or just graduate from high school. Sometimes a great accomplishment for some of those kids. Kind of what is it that keeps the why that keeps driving you, and any words of wisdom you can give to somebody watching this saying, am I doing the right thing? And am I really making a difference?
You never know how big the difference is making, because you are making a difference. You just might not always know how. Especially, I feel like if you're in the middle school and elementary schools, you don't necessarily know what the end result is, or what the how the kid has changed unless they come back and tell you. But no matter what, teachers do make a difference. Um, I keep a why I teach folder. So it's letters, it's notes, it's cards that I get from students, and I keep it in a file folder that says why I teach. So on those days when I have a bad day, I go in there and I just read a couple of them and reset. Like right in front of me, I have an email that I got from a student who's now in the military, and he sent me an email at the beginning of the year, and I have that taped up because obviously COVID times, it's hard. So I use that and I look at it and I can just, get that little inspiration. So it's just that you never know what you end up doing or what you end up saying that's going to impact someone's life.
Uh, you don't. What you do in seventh or eighth grade for a child, all of a sudden when they're 18, 20, 22, maybe where they're leaving. Because I mean, like you, my parents, my dad as a teacher and a coach had a big impact on what I did. But my eighth grade science teacher is probably the one guy that really made me start thinking about teaching and stuff. And back when I used to live in Iowa, I used to see him all the time, even when I taught and coached in the district, and thanked him for it many times. And I had myself and a buddy, one of the sons he had when he was teaching us, he named my name's Jeff, and his name was Scott, my buddy. They named their son Jeffrey Scott. And so it's kind of a cool thing. And later years, I watched him grow up through the school district there and play some basketball. But that teacher always stuck with me. And unfortunately, when you talk about why you teach, and I love that idea, the why I teach folder to remind you. I never thought of that, and I thought of a lot of things. But at a young age, it was at my first year at Richfield. My father passed away at 50 as a teacher and a coach, and I went to a funeral, and I mean, there was thousands of people there. They packed the parking lot, the church, and unfortunately, you don't really know the impact you made on kids to the end, but it hit me real early. I'm going to make sure I respect that, because I mean, you having had parents in education and stuff, probably hear a few more stories about the impact they've made for people.
Oh, for sure.
And I just really want to thank you, Dave, for sharing the story, Sarah. I know this is going to make a difference and impact on people that watch. I want to thank you for the impact you've made in the kids in Richfield and my own daughter. And I love you sharing the stories. I mean, I'm done teaching, but I love hearing these stories, and it just kind of gets me excited for the day,
Right.
But for you all watching here, I want to thank you for coming to Coach Etch Tips. Get more information to team up with coache.com. And if you liked what you heard today, please hit the subscribe button and ring the bell, and share other people. If you like the story that Sarah had to share with you today, share that with other people that you know out there. And thanks a lot for tuning in. Hey, thanks for sticking around for the wrap up here with Sarah today. What a great discussion. I really enjoyed it. I got a lot out of it, really got some great new tips. I hope maybe you got some of the same tips that I got. I just want to go back and review a few key points that really stuck out to me. I thought one thing that was interesting is she talked about, kind of what moved her to get into teaching. One of the things that always stayed with her was she learned early on from her tennis coach was the importance of attitude, that whatever attitude you bring, is the one you will get back. And then she tries to share that with her students, the importance of attitude. And I know sometimes, especially teaching at the middle school and high school level, those attitudes and the hormones and stuff can be really all around the place. So it was a really neat idea. I never thought about attitude, even though I appreciate it. I never thought about it in that way. She said that in the day of COVID, she's created an online community builders with their colleagues to make it as fun, as interactive as they can. And I think it's been a real challenge, as we talked about how teachers have had to pivot and change so quickly. So she's brought a group of teachers together to kind of create this online community that their kids can feel important, that they can get involved and have some fun. She likes to start off her hour with kids online with a dance party, letting the kids see a little part of her, even if they can't see, if she can't see their faces, but she pays attention to those avatars to get in touch and find out what's really important with them. One thing she thinks is really important to make them feel like that they have buy-in in the classroom, that they are involved in helping set some of the norms and expectations, and to have them help create them. And it's kind of a common thread as I hear middle school teachers talk, is to let those students and even high school students to feel like their voices are heard. It seems like that's so common in America nowadays, that people want to be heard. And as I've always heard and said, that communication is one of the most important things about communications, more than anything, is the listening aspect, not the talking, but the listening. She tries to find ways to connect with them, maybe through their icon that they put up on the computer, or just paying close attention to the words or some things that might be in the background if she does get to see their videos. One of the things I thought was really cool, and I'm sure if I was in school, this idea would have popped up, was the idea of a virtual locker room to get to know them. And it's kind of letting them know what's important to them on the inside, and let people share, learn a little bit more about each other, where you're not in the same way where you can sit in the classroom and talk with the student or talk in the hallways with them. But she also does this locker for herself too, to let those students kind of connect with her, which is really a neat thing as you utilize technology. She likes to be a little bit vulnerable and open up and let them get to know her, with the dancing part of it. But she's not perfect, and she's going to make mistakes sometimes too. And it's okay for them to make a mistake. As we kind of started to wrap up with talking about students and control in the classroom with behavior, one of the things that I thought she made a good point is, especially with students in those adolescent years and young teenage years, humor is a big part of their social life, but sometimes that humor can go too far, and that she felt it was important as a role for her as a teacher in the classroom to kind of keep an eye on that humor. And when she catches it starting to go a little too far, to maybe pull the student over one-on-one and say, be sure and be considerate of their feelings, because you just never know how that's going to impact your friend. Because as we all know, if you've been around those adolescent ages, kids can be very sensitive, and it doesn't take much to take it from being ecstatic and happy to extremely upset and bummed out. And another common thread with connecting with kids, building rapport and trust, is getting involved in with them outside of the classroom, finding out what their interests are. She suggested maybe pick one night a week, even though it's a commitment time, to go plug into those plays or concerts or the game or some sort of activity they're involved in, that you can just show up, and you don't necessarily have to stay for the whole time. The big thing is for that student to come there, and what's the word, be visible, just to see that you showed up. That lets them know that you care about them as a person just as much as a student, maybe even more, that you took the time out of your life to come and spend time with them. So she says it's really important to invest in kids outside the classroom, taking that one night there. Then from the standpoint of self-care and taking care of, she talked about her family life and the balance of having a husband that's very supportive, but is able to help her remember the boundaries, that she doesn't do too much. I thought it was interesting that she created a separate area to teach and work in the time of COVID in her basement, so that when she's done working, she can completely remove herself from that location and have a completely new environment and really feel like she's left work and come home. And then her husband steps in and cooks dinner for her and says, okay, it's time to quit grading, come to work, so she can finish up, and then it's family time for the rest of the night. And one thing I really appreciate, being a former physical education and health teacher, is getting exercise is really important. And I think especially in the time when you're sitting in a chair, you're indoors all the time, finding a way to exercise, whether it's just getting up and running in place in your home, or if the weather's nice enough, you're in a location, get outside and get moving, clear your mind. And it's amazing how creative your thought can become too when you're doing that time and out there moving about. And one key point to wrap up that she talked about is that you just never know how big the difference is you are making. You don't know what the end result may be of what you said or did for that student, especially when you're teaching in the younger years. You don't always reap the rewards at the 7th, 8th, or 9th grader. But when you've been around long enough, and maybe if you're new, you got to borrow these stories from other teachers, you get to see those students come back. I thought it was really cool that she keeps a Why I Teach folder, because there are those rough days when you need to find something deep down inside, whatever it was, whether it was in your personal life, professional life, with a student, whatever it could be, that you want to keep yourself going. And it kind of helps you remember when you get those letters and those messages, those emails, to reflect back to them and to kind of, she said, to reset her mind, to get in the right place. I thought it was cool. A former student who was in the military, she has that email now at home, stuck up on the wall right by her computer every day, to help her remember why she does what she does, to help her get through these days, especially these times. And again, for those of you out there working with young children, with teenagers, just remember, you never know what you may end up saying or doing that may impact one's life for the better. And that's really why we're here, to make a difference and to make an impact. So I hope you enjoyed, Sarah. I hope you enjoyed the whole show today. If you did, please subscribe, ring that bell, and share it with others. We would just like to get this around. And if there's any way we can help connect with you, all the contact information is here on the page. And I want to wish you all the best and have a great one.